Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about all of life through the prism of food. And this week I'm with one of the main players in the story of modern British food, Michel Roux Junior.
And then I relaxed the jacket rule for gentlemen as well. My dad was in absolute shock horror. He said, "You can't do this. This is the end. Gavroche is going to die because of this." I said, "No, it isn't. It's going to actually revive and rejuvenate." And it did.
His Mayfair restaurant, Le Gavroche, is a London legend, and its closure last month, 57 years after his father and uncle, the Roux Brothers, changed the game in British food, is a milestone in the way we eat. At 63, he's ready for the next chapter, and he's marking it with his latest book, Michel Roux at Home. I asked him how he's feeling.
It's been very mixed emotions, obviously, because, I've been at the helm there for 35 years, so that's a huge chunk of my life. But very positive as well, and that's what I take forward. And it's all because I planned it way in advance, and so far so good. It's all gone to plan, and it's a real sort of finishing on a high.
I mean, there's so much that I want to talk to you about, obviously. I want to talk to you about the whole history of eating out in Britain and the legacy of Le Gavroche and what it has taught us. But let's start by talking about the book. Let's start talking about now. I mean, it's called Michel Roux at Home. What does that mean? Does it just literally mean not in Le Gavroche? It's not about posh food. It's not about fancy French food. It's about me and Giselle. What to you is At Home about?
It's exactly that, as you've described it. It's Michel Roux at home, what I cook at home, what we eat at home, Giselle and I, and the family. It's good, proper, simple, for the most part, French and Provençal cooking.
It reads like that. The intro reads like my grandmother going shopping. I mean, she would go to the butcher and the grocer, and of course in those days they were all around on most high streets. But it also reminds me of the 70s, actually. It reminds me of Alice Waters. It reminds me of her going to France and seeing that and wanting that and taking it to America and creating the farm-to-fork revolution. I wonder if we've kind of come full circle, or you've brought your Frenchness to this very sort of simple offering through your book. What's the connection between the France that Alice Waters brought and then people like Sally Clark and all of them brought to Britain, and this book?
Yeah, I've never actually thought of it like that. It's brought a big smile and a grin to my face because it's taken somebody else to actually to see that in, and it's very absolutely 100% true. But we take it for granted. As a Frenchman, French family, we actually do, I think, take it for granted that there is a market there on our doorstep, and in the little village that I live, it's on a Thursday, and the village next door, it's on a Wednesday, and then the 10 kilometres down the road, it's on a Friday, and so on and so forth. So there's a market village every day of the week, and in my village there's a butcher, then 2 bakers, and it's just a little stroll down the road, and you pick up wonderful ingredients, and you cook what is there and what is in season, and very, very rarely do I wake up in the morning and think, okay, I'm going to cook this for lunch or this for dinner. It's a stroll to the market, and I see what's there, and then I cook it. And I think that is what Alice Waters discovered and saw and took to America. And it is the daily life in La Belle France, in rural France.
And increasingly so in Britain, really. Let's just stay with that idea of Alice Waters and, all the people who went to Alice Waters' sort of world at that time. There was an awakening, wasn't there? I'm very interested in what it was and later what happened at Le Gavroche, which awakened something that was already there in people. They loved it. What is that? What was the ache? What was the gap that was being filled?
Yes, you're right. I think it's probably a connection with nature. I was fortunate to dine with Giselle many, many moons ago at Alice Waters, and it was just that. But it is a connection with nature, and you're quite rightly say as well that we seem to be coming full circle, and the UK is now, sort of edging towards that market culture and market life. I mean, just where I live here in South London, there's a little fishmonger that's opened up a few months ago. Good luck to him, but it is tough. But it is nice to see that there are now more and more independents that are opening up and that are showcasing local produce, and that's how we should shop, and that's how we should cook and eat.
Let's go through the legacy of Le Gavroche. I mean, Jay Rayner said that its job is done. It was never just a restaurant, it was a school. He says various establishments were vital to the food revolution in this country, and Le Gavroche is the big one, largely because it trained so many amazing chefs. You know, we know that Roly Lee, Monica Galetti, Pierre Kaufman, Marco Pierre White, Gordon Ramsay, they all came out of those kitchens. But for you, looking back over what your uncle and your father created way back then, do you agree with Jay, or is it something else? Was it also filling another gap, a different gap?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really. I can't really argue with Jay. I mean, on that point, he's 100% right. The Le Gavroche was more than a restaurant; it was also a school and not just a school for apprentices, but also a finishing school for many chefs. And let's not forget front of house as well, because many great sommeliers and maître d's have managers have come through the school of what was Le Gavroche. It will go down, I think, in history as one of the pioneers of gastronomy in the UK. It filled a gap at that particular time, and my father and uncle always wanted to inspire and teach and pass on their knowledge to the next generation, which I have done in my and still continue to do in my career, and so does Alain and the Waterside Inn, and it's through various means, such as working with colleges or through the Roux Scholarship.
I mean, Albert and Michel were very commercial. They spotted a gap in the market. The London of the 1970s, the 60s that they were dining in, they were both private chefs at that time, weren't they? And one of them was in France, one of them was in Kent. And they came to London to dine. Why? Who on earth would do that? But anyway, what they were doing, they were scouting out an opportunity, weren't they? They saw an opportunity there. Now, I wonder if they saw people around them going, God, I wish there wasn't such beige restaurants around here. I wish there was something to eat. Or they actually thought, God, there is literally nothing here. What a great city. Let's do something. I mean, in the conversations that you've had as you were growing up, I mean, what's the feeling from the family of that story?
Yeah. Dad first came to England, or UK actually. He went to Ireland first as, I think, back in the mid-50s and then late 50s, again, just a short stint. And I think he fell in love with the country and fell in love with the culture and everything that maybe British people take for granted. But it certainly wasn't the food, that's for sure. That is for sure. Nor the ingredients, because it really was very, very poor. And the UK was still, or England was still under rations and just coming out of the war. But he loved the people, loved the pageantry, loved everything. He just fell in love with it. And so he wanted to come and work in England. And he managed to get a job through the English embassy in Paris, and got this job in private house in Kent at the Fairlawn estate for the Cazalet family, and absolutely loved it. And his brother, my uncle, had always said to Dad, look, I'll follow you wherever you go, and the dream is one day to open a restaurant. So I think, well, Dad was the first one to come here, and shortly followed by Uncle. And I think they probably did, see that there was a massive gap in the market. And Dad was always the risk taker in business, and wanted to expand quickly and open restaurants everywhere. And Uncle was very cautious and tried to hold him back, but they worked so well together. There was a love-hate brotherly relationship. They were at each other's throats very often, but their love and their bond was just unbelievable.
And of course, it was so much more than food that they were bringing. There was a wonderful sort of it's about fashion, isn't it? It's about cool, and it's about aspiration. And I wonder if your uncle and your father saw something in the Brits which was much more something they could manipulate, perhaps, to create the stunningly successful business that they did. In that, I think perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, but the British are more into aspiration, keeping up with the Joneses, being seen in the right places. I wonder if they saw that opportunity, because that's certainly what Le Gavroche came to represent, wasn't it? Part of it, anyway.
That's true. The British, keeping up with the Joneses and sort of peering over the fence to see what your neighbour's doing, what kind of lawnmower he's got. Oh, I've got to get the best one and a better one. So there's a little bit of that, and the French are certainly not like that. Actually, they're for the most part the opposite. The Gavroche did become one of those. That's true. Aspirational. To be able to come and dine at Le Gavroche was what a lot of people aspired to and would save up for, which is very, very humbling. Whenever I used to do the rounds in the restaurant, in the dining room, and meet people, meet and greet them, and to hear these wonderful stories of people that were saving up just for that occasion, for a special anniversary or birthday, and that really is wonderful. That always used to make me smile and make me happy.
I remember when I was working at Delicious magazine, talking to Karen Barnes about that very thing, because I came to interview you then for the Delicious podcast, and I said, bit posh for Delicious perhaps, and she said, no, absolutely not. This is for people who really do spend 2 or 3 years saving up for something so special. So it wasn't just for the posh people, but that was very much when you were at the helm. Let's talk about how Le Gavroche and how food in London in particular changed when you were running the ship. Immigration has changed the way that we eat in Britain, I think particularly in London. And while you were steering the Le Gavroche in the last sort of 20 years, let's say, what did you notice about all the wonderful restaurants that were coming up around, that were much more sort of diverse? And how did it influence what you were doing at Le Gavroche?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, over my tenure at Le Gavroche, the average age of the diner really did come down. And I think that was due to a couple of things that I introduced almost immediately as I took over. And that was the tie rule that was very, very strict. Gentlemen had to wear a jacket and tie, and the dress code was very, very strict. So I relaxed that, and then shortly after that, I relaxed the jacket rule for gentlemen as well. My dad was in absolute shock horror. He said, "You can't do this. This is the end. Gavroche is going to die because of this." I said, "No, it isn't. It's going to actually revive and rejuvenate." And it did. And it certainly did. And it also brought in a younger crowd, which was fantastic. And when Dad was at the helm, I think the average age was way, way up in the 50s and 60s. And more recently, I mean, just before we closed, I would say the average age was probably in the high 30s or 40s, which is fantastic. And that's, and it meant that there was a renewal of regular guests because it was... In my father's tenure, it was deemed as very, very, very snooty and only for the toffs, or as it were, and a certain couche sociale, and which I managed to sort of change.
And is that because people are eating out more often, that perhaps restaurants are not so much about aspiration anymore, that there is a genuine taste for the wide variety and what food represents to so many people? I wonder what your take in, as a Frenchman, of what food means to British people now.
100%. I mean, now I think going out for dinner is seen as also a night out. I mean, it's a night out. It's not just sitting down for a meal, and so much pleasure can be taken from dining out, and there's such a varied choice. It's absolutely spectacular. I think it's wonderful, and I think that's where London actually trumps a lot of big cities in I'd say Paris even, for example, because there is such a wonderful varied choice, and at any price level, I genuinely believe that London especially, and I'm talking about London because I live here and I know London very well, it's spectacular. The dining scene is wonderful, and so varied and eclectic. So that has changed so much, and Dad used to really, really enjoy seeing that, and he used to dine out regularly. I mean, he wasn't so keen on Eastern flavors or spice and things like that. I mean, his taste was fairly conservative and very French. But he used to, his eyes used to light up when he used to see all these restaurants opening up, and he used to think, it's wonderful, isn't it beautiful to see? And people enjoying themselves and with filling their bellies with spectacular food, and it doesn't have to be expensive as well. That's the thing. Exactly.
But looking at your 4 food moments from your book, they are pretty classic French, aren't they? As a Londoner, a very French family, but you've lived in London all your life, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was born here, born in Kent and raised in South London. And obviously I've worked a lot, very, very extensively in France, and all my family are French still. But I have dual nationality, and I suppose I consider myself French when the French rugby team are winning and English when the England team are winning. So very much on the fence.
Yeah. But in terms of your food moments, I mean, let's go through them. I mean, the omelette with mushrooms, it sums up, I think, very perfectly what this book is about. It is beautifully cooked omelette with lots of flavour, but it's a very simple recipe. But it is French. Is it? Tell me why you chose it, of all the recipes in the book, as an example of what you wanted to talk about with it.
Yes, well, for me, an omelette is my idea of fast food. I'm really not keen on the high street fast food chains or any kind of that style of fast food. If I'm hungry, I will rustle up an omelette, and omelettes are great vehicles for anything, even leftovers. They're nutritious, they're so quick, and I cut my teeth cooking omelettes at a restaurant called Le Pulbo in the city that my father and uncle used to have. So there was an omelette section, or an omelette station, as it were, and so you'd sell 20, 30 omelettes for lunch, all different fillings, and you had to really, really know how to, because it was lovely cast iron pans as well, not your new non-stick pans. So I know a thing or two about omelettes, so I just love them.
Funnily enough, it was one of the very first things that we're taught to cook it as part of the Leith's Essentials course. I think it's the second module. Who'd have thought? First of all, you do your knife skills, then you're making omelettes. And there is a particular way to make a perfect omelette. You do it with mushrooms. Are you a forager?
Yes, actually, at Christmas time we went for a stroll in the forest next to where my village is, and we found some lovely mushrooms that we cleaned up and cooked them for dinner in the evening. So yeah, it is part of rural life in France anyway, and we do enjoy it. We only pick the mushrooms that we are 100% sure that we know are mushrooms, but also chestnuts. We go out and get some chestnuts. and lots of different kinds of mushrooms, and sometimes truffle hunting with one of our friends in the village that's got a very, very smart, cute little dog.
Your second food moment, watercress soup. Again, incredibly simple, but with a twist. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so watercress soup was actually one of the first dishes that was on the original Le Gavroche menu. And you would think it's so simple, isn't it? It's a soup. But the way it's done is particular because it stays vibrant and green, and it has that wonderful full flavour, pepperiness of watercress, which I love, and Dad used to love too. But I've accompanied it with a piece of black pudding and a poached egg on top, and I think it becomes something. Yeah, I mean, it just becomes a full meal because you've got that lovely meatiness and almost sweetness of the black pudding, and the egg as you break into it just adds that lovely richness of yolk, and it's a meal in a bowl.
It's interesting that you describe yourself and Giselle as flexitarians. It's interesting, the introduction. It feels again like that full circle that we talked about at the beginning. All the classics of French rural life, the very embodiment of all things that we know to be French, but that have come to become British, the way that the Brits eat as well. But flexitarianism is probably at the moment a little bit more how you would describe a British person rather than a French person. How's the flexitarianism going when you're back in France?
Well, I would argue that it's very French as well, especially outside of the big cities. I think big cities are because you've got so much temptations there to snack or to fast food, and the French are now becoming very, very keen on fast food as well as the UK, the same way as the UK and the rest of the world. But if you live outside in the country, you definitely don't eat meat at every meal. That is for sure, and sometimes skip it. Maybe not every day. So it's I don't mind skipping, or I don't miss it. And neither does Giselle miss eating meat. I mean, and I would rather forego than eating cheap industrial farmed meat for sure. I'd rather have a nice roast chicken on a Sunday, but it has to be a good one. And if I have to pay a little bit more for that chicken, so be it. But I won't eat poorly raised or badly raised animals.
Yeah, and again, that's again the full circle. Going back to my grandmother and the way that she ate, there was no industrial meat at that time; just wasn't available. And now we have to literally not eat meat in order to save up for the organic chicken on a Sunday. Your third food moment is a roast vegetable tarte tatin, something that we would absolutely associate with all things French. Why did you choose this one as your third food moment?
Well, it celebrates vegetable, which we love in the family, and alluded to in the previous sort of question as well. I mean, there are so many great vegetables that if you cook them properly, they can be so fulfilling and so filling and wonderful to eat. And the tarte tatin, great French classic, normally with apples or pears, but why not with vegetables? And it can be, this particular tarte tatin can be a meal on its own, maybe just with a few bitter leaves to offset the sweetness. Or it can be as an accompaniment, a slice of tarte tatin, vegetable tarte tatin with a Sunday roast. And it's just delicious. It is incredibly simple as well to make. Very versatile. You can put almost any kind of vegetables in there, and you can spice it up as well with a bit of chili or whatever. It's just wonderful. It's an easy, treat to be had.
Well, I remember Marco Pierre White telling me about 30 years ago when I interviewed him at Harvey's that you can tell a great chef by his, never said her, tarte tatin. So it and what do you think he meant by that? What is the secret to a great tarte tatin?
Ingredients and patience. You can't rush it. You need time to make a good tarte tatin. And whether you're doing a classic apple or pear one, you need to take your time. You can't really rush a tarte tatin.
Something else you can't rush. I made the wonderful the poussin red wine earlier this week, and again it reminded me of actually the way my mother used to. She was trained to cook at a cookery school in Norfolk somewhere, but she learnt the French way, and it was all about taking each bit. You fry off the chicken, the poussin first, and you're caramelizing the onions. I mean, it is about sort of bringing out the flavour of each of the individual ingredients before you put it in for a good long slow oven. That's the key, isn't it, to getting great taste? When you were just talking about fast food, that is the big difference, isn't it? And we have developed a taste for that. Do you think that we'll ever stop really yearning for that gorgeous depth of flavour?
Depth of flavour comes normally from low and slow and patience. Yes, indeed. It's very, very fulfilling. And I love this time of the year especially because it lends itself to that kind of cooking and style. And those lovely rich sauces that you only get from low and slow cooking. There are so many recipes like that. I mean, the great classics, the beef bourguignon, the coq au vin, which you were alluding to, and things like that. But it is... Gosh, yeah, I'm just salivating. My tummy is rumbling just thinking about it. What's for lunch?
So what is for lunch? What will you cook for Giselle? Or what does Giselle cook for you?
No. I tend to do most of the cooking at home. That's why she married me. She married a chef for a reason. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I haven't even opened the fridge door, so I don't know what's in the fridge. But it will be a very light lunch because I've got a busy afternoon.
And that is something you talk about a lot as well. And you can see from the look of you, you are very healthy. That's something else that has really changed. Fancy French food used to be something that you'd put on a lot of weight. There'd be a lot of cream, a lot of butter. I remember again asking Marco Pierre White to give me a Mediterranean diet recipe. He told me where to go because there was no way that he was not going to use cream and butter in anything that he used. But it came at a cost, isn't it? And the way that you cook now is very different. It is healthy while full of flavour. I mean, how do you manage that? What are your feelings about the full fat stuff?
I love animal fats, love butter, love cream. Not as much as Dad, though, bless him. He certainly did go over the top on his animal fats, and I think that was probably because he lived through the war and wanted, in those days you couldn't have much animal fats. There was hardly any butter, hardly any cream. So as soon as he could, he dived into it head first and wallowed in butter and cream. I hate zero fat or reduced fat ingredients. I think it's a waste of time and a waste of pleasure. No, we should celebrate cream and animal fats and eat them, but part of a balanced diet and definitely not shy away or run away from them. I use a lot of butter in my cooking, but it's not as much as my dad do. I think that's a generational thing as well. But I do love the Mediterranean diet too. My wife is from Provence and celebrate everything that is olive oil and everything that is, from that region. In her parents' fridge, there was never ever any butter or cream. It was always cooking was always around olive oil.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of cream in your final food moment, which is the blackberry and apple millefeuille. Tell us why you decided this one had to be amongst your 4 food moments.
Well, that's down to Giselle. It's her favourite dessert, the millefeuille. Anything with puff pastry, she absolutely adores. That's a little nod and a wink to my dear wife. Whenever I'm thinking of rustling up a dessert for her, it normally involves puff pastries, the millefeuille for Giselle.
What are you two going to do with the rest of your lives? I mean, we're looking at people living for a good old age, and you're a very healthy couple, and you've got plenty of opportunities coming your way. What do you want? What's the next 10 years hold for you?
Well, the closing of Le Gavroche has certainly opened up a little bit of time, but most importantly, the closing of Le Gavroche has relieved me and Giselle, obviously, from a lot of stress and a lot of responsibility, because running a Michelin-starred restaurant is stressful. It's very wearing, having 50 staff on the books as well, and having to make sure that we generate enough cash to pay the bills, etc., etc., etc. And of course, Michelin or the reviews, being able to make sure that every single plate of food is to the level required and expected. So it is so I suppose what I'm saying is it's going to free up a little bit of time, but most importantly, a huge weight off the shoulders, and that's that is probably the most important thing. And the mental health issues, is very, very important. I've got lots of other stuff that I'm involved in. Anything from going aboard the Queen Mary and the Queen Anne, soon to be launched, and taking Le Gavroche at sea, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. And then lots of other, residencies and pop-ups of taking Le Gavroche on the road, which is, I'm really looking forward to that. That's great fun. And being able to do other stuff, a little bit of fishing as well. I've got a few dates in the diary as well, so I've got a bit of catching up to do there. Oh, and looking after my grandkids as well, which is I'm very, very much looking forward to.
Exciting, and taking them to a Gavroche pop-up. I love that. Again, this full circle, supper clubs, pop-ups, they're so London, aren't they? Tell me, what does a Gavroche pop-up look like?
It's going to look like Le Gavroche, for sure. There will be recognisable dishes there. Maybe the soufflé suissesse will make an appearance. It did actually, just in January, I did a little pop-up with Emily in her restaurant, Caractère in Notting Hill, and the soufflé suissesse was on the menu, which was wonderful to see it pop up again. So yeah, that's what it's going to be like. It's going to be joyous, fun, some recognisable dishes, maybe some special wines that we haven't sold off at Le Gavroche. So we're holding back some of the great wines too. So yeah, it's a far more relaxed affair.
Thanks for listening. Do head to my Substack, that's gillysmith.substack.com, for lots more content about cooking the books and my writing retreats and all things to do with cookbooks. And I'll see you next week.